3 days before our wedding, my fiancée vanished without a single explanation. No goodbye. No note. No phone call. Nothing. Then 8 months later, she showed up at my door pregnant. I wish I could tell you that's the craziest part of this story. It's not. The truth behind where she went, who she was with, and why she disappeared destroyed everything I thought I knew about love, family, loyalty, and trust. Even now, years later, there are nights when I wake up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling, wondering how I missed all the signs. Wondering if I ever really knew her at all. My name is Ethan. And this is the most painful confession of my life. The day she disappeared was supposed to be one of the happiest weeks of my life. Our wedding was only 3 days away. The venue was booked. The flowers had arrived. My tuxedo was hanging in the closet. Family members had flown in from across the country. Everything was ready. Everything except what happened next. I remember waking up that morning and reaching for my phone. There were 6 missed calls from her mother. At first, I thought maybe there had been some kind of wedding emergency. Maybe a vendor canceled. Maybe there was a problem with the seating arrangements. I called her back immediately. The moment she answered, I knew something was wrong. She was crying. Not normal crying. Panic crying. The kind of crying that makes your stomach drop before you've even heard the words. Ethan. She whispered. She's gone. I sat upright in bed. What do you mean, gone? Emily isn't here. I frowned. What are you talking about? She never came home last night. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process what she was saying. Emily had gone out for dinner with her maid of honor the night before. That was it. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. Just wedding stuff. At least that's what I thought. I tried calling Emily immediately. Straight to voicemail. 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 I texted her. No response. I drove to her apartment. Empty. I checked her favorite coffee shop. Nothing. I called every friend she had. Nobody had seen her. Nobody knew where she was. At least that's what they claimed. By noon, panic had spread through both families. By evening, police were involved. By midnight, I realized something terrifying. My fiancée had vanished without leaving a single trace behind. The next morning, things got even stranger. Her parents suddenly stopped answering questions. Every time I asked where she might have gone, they exchanged nervous looks. Her older brother refused to make eye contact with me. Her aunt burst into tears whenever Emily's name was mentioned. Something felt wrong. Not grief. Not confusion. As if they knew something they weren't telling me. I kept asking questions. Nobody gave answers. Days passed. Then weeks. The months. The wedding was canceled. Guests went home. Deposits were lost. Rumors spread. Some people said she got cold feet. Others claimed she had been cheating. A few even suggested I had done something to make her leave. I became the guy whose bride ran away. The punchline of everyone's gossip. The object of pity. The man was left standing alone at the altar. And the worst part? I still loved her. Even after she disappeared. Even after she humiliated me. Even after she shattered my entire future. I still wanted answers. Because none of it made sense. Emily wasn't cruel. She wasn't selfish. She wasn't the kind of person who would destroy someone's life without explanation. At least that's what I believed. For 8 long months, I searched for her. Then one rainy evening, everything changed. There was a knock on my front door. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. Because standing on my porch was the last person I ever expected to see again. Emily. And she was pregnant. Very pregnant. The moment our eyes met, I knew this story wasn't over. It was only beginning. And what she told me that night would uncover secrets buried for over 20 years. Secrets powerful enough to tear 2 families apart. Secrets that would make me question whether any part of my life had ever been real. But before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand who Emily was. And why I was willing to spend 8 months searching for a woman who disappeared without a word. Because our story didn't begin with betrayal. It began with what looked like the perfect love story. Before everything fell apart, before the lies, the secrets, and the disappearance, there was Emily. And honestly, she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I met her when I was 27. At the time, I was working as a project manager for a construction company and living a pretty ordinary life. My days were predictable. Dinner. Repeat. I wasn't looking for love. In fact, after a painful breakup 2 years earlier, I had convinced myself that relationships were more trouble than they were worth. Then one random Thursday afternoon changed everything. I was standing in line at a small coffee shop near my office when I noticed a woman arguing with the cashier. Not aggressively. Embarrassingly. She had forgotten her wallet. The poor cashier looked uncomfortable. The woman looked mortified. And the line behind her kept growing. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was her smile. Maybe it was the way she laughed at herself. Maybe it was fate. I stepped forward and paid for her coffee. She immediately protested. No, absolutely not. It's just a coffee. It's the principle. I laughed. Then buy me one tomorrow. She paused. Then smiled. Deal. That was Emily. And somehow, that stupid cup of coffee turned into a 6-hour conversation. Then a first date. Then a second. Then a relationship that felt effortless. For the first time in my life, I felt understood. She wasn't just beautiful. She was kind. The kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday. The kind of person who volunteered at animal shelters. The kind of person who called her grandmother every Sunday without fail. Everyone loved her. My friends loved her. My parents adored her. Even my cynical older brother, who disliked almost everyone, approved of her. That alone felt like a miracle. For 3 years, our relationship was nearly perfect. Of course, we argued occasionally. Every couple does. But our disagreements never lasted long. We talked through everything. Or at least I thought we did. Looking back now, I realize there were warning signs. Tiny ones. Easy to dismiss. The kind that only makes sense after disaster strikes. For example, Emily hated talking about her childhood. Whenever conversations drifted toward family history, she would become uncomfortable. Not angry. Just distant. Quiet. Like someone staring through a window at a storm they didn't want to remember. One night, while lying in bed, I asked her a simple question. What were you like in high school? Most people would answer immediately. Emily didn't. She stared at the ceiling for nearly 20 seconds. Then she said, "Trust me, you wouldn't have liked me back then." I laughed. What does that mean? Nothing. And she changed the subject. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Everyone has things they don't like discussing. Everyone has painful memories. I respected her boundaries. Maybe too much. Then there was her relationship with her family. From the outside, they seemed close. Holiday dinners. Birthday parties. Weekend visits. Everything looked normal. But occasionally I noticed strange tension. Especially between Emily and her father. Sometimes they would be laughing together one moment. Then suddenly the atmosphere would change. Like someone had flipped a switch. The smiles disappeared. The conversation died. And neither of them would explain why. Once, after Thanksgiving dinner, I walked into the kitchen and accidentally overheard part of an argument. Emily's father looked furious. Emily looked terrified. The moment they saw me, they stopped talking. Instantly. Like actors ending a scene. I asked what happened. Her father smiled. Nothing. Emily forced a smile too. Nothing. But it definitely wasn't nothing. Still, life moved forward. And eventually I proposed. It happened during a weekend trip to the mountains. Nothing elaborate. No flash mob. No fireworks. Just the two of us standing beside a lake at sunset. I had rehearsed a speech for weeks. The moment arrived. And I forgot every word. I just looked at her and said, "I don't want another day of my life without you." Then I got down on one knee. She started crying before I even opened the ring box. "Yes." She said it before I asked. Then she laughed. Then cried harder. Then hugged me so tightly I almost fell into the lake. It was perfect. Or so I believed. The engagement brought both families together. Wedding planning consumed our lives. Venues. Flowers. Guest list. Catering. Music. Photographers. Every week felt like another step toward our future. Emily seemed genuinely excited. She spent hours looking at wedding dresses. She obsessed over centerpieces. She made endless Pinterest boards. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was planning to disappear. Nothing. Then about 4 months before the wedding, something strange happened. We were having dinner at my apartment when her phone buzzed. The moment she saw the screen, her entire expression changed. Fear. Real fear. I had never seen it before. "Everything okay?" I asked. She immediately flipped the phone face down. "Yeah." "You sure?" "Just spam." But she looked shaken. A minute later, she walked into the bathroom carrying her phone. She stayed there nearly 15 minutes. When she returned, her eyes were red. As if she'd been crying. I asked what happened. She claimed she had gotten soap in her eye. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. A few weeks later, it happened again. Another phone call. Another nervous reaction. Another excuse. Then another. And another. Each incident lasted only minutes. Each explanation sounded reasonable. Yet something felt off. Not enough to accuse her of anything. Just enough to make me uneasy. One evening, I finally asked directly, "Emily, is there something you're not telling me?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment, she looked genuinely frightened. Then she forced a smile. "No. Are you sure?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I love you." That wasn't an answer. But it was enough to silence my doubts. At least temporarily. A month before the wedding, I noticed another odd detail. She began receiving letters. Not emails. Not packages. Actual handwritten letters. No return address. No sender information. Just plain white envelopes. Whenever one arrived, she hid it immediately. I asked who they were from. She said they were personal. I respected that. Looking back now, that may have been my biggest mistake. Because the truth was already closing in around us. And I was too blind to see it. 3 weeks before the wedding, Emily started acting nervous. She barely slept. She seemed distracted, lost in thought. Several times, I caught her staring at me with tears in her eyes. When I asked what was wrong, she would simply say, "Nothing." One night she hugged me longer than usual. Much longer. Almost desperately. As if she were saying goodbye. If only I had understood. If only I had asked more questions. Maybe everything would have been different. Then came the week of our wedding. Family members arrived from out of town. The venue completed final preparations. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled. Everything was ready. 3 days later, we were supposed to become husband and wife. Instead, Emily went out for dinner with her maid of honor. And never came back. At first, nobody panicked. Then midnight arrived. Then 2 in the morning. Then sunrise. And suddenly the perfect future we had spent years building began collapsing around us. What none of us knew was that Emily's disappearance wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't random. And it definitely wasn't because she got cold feet. Someone had been preparing for that night for a very long time. And somewhere hidden among her belongings, the first clue was waiting to be discovered. The first 24 hours after Emily disappeared felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. At first, I kept telling myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe her car broke down. Maybe her phone died. Maybe there had been some emergency. Maybe she was sitting somewhere right now trying to contact me. But as the hours passed, those explanations stopped making sense. Nobody had seen her. Nobody had heard from her. And most disturbing of all, nobody seemed nearly as surprised as they should have been. The police questioned everyone. Friends, family members, coworkers, neighbors, anyone who might have known something. The answers were always the same. No one knew where Emily was. No one had seen her. No one understood why she disappeared. Yet every time I looked at her parents, I felt something was wrong. Especially her father, Franklin. A respected businessman. Successful. Well-spoken. The kind of man who always seemed calm. Too calm. While everyone else was panicking, Franklin appeared strangely controlled. Almost prepared. I remember sitting across from him in his living room on the second day. His wife was crying uncontrollably. His son paced the floor. Meanwhile, Franklin sat perfectly still. Hands folded. Expression unreadable. I finally lost my patience. "Why aren't you worried?" The room went silent. Franklin looked at me. "I'm very worried." "No, you're not. Ethan, your daughter vanished 2 days before her wedding, and you're acting like someone canceled a meeting." His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might actually say something important. Instead, he simply stood up. "I think everyone should get some rest." That answer haunted me, because it wasn't an answer at all. Meanwhile, the wedding date arrived. A day that should have been filled with music, laughter, and celebration. Instead, it became the most humiliating day of my life. Hundreds of guests had already traveled across the country. Many had booked hotels. Some had taken vacation time from work. And now every one of them wanted answers. Questions spread faster than rumors. Had Emily cheated? Had she run away? Had we been fighting? Was the wedding canceled permanently? Nobody knew. Least of all me. I stood inside the empty venue that afternoon. Rows of white chairs stretched across the room. The flowers were already arranged. The decorations were finished. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked ready. Except the bride never came. I remember staring at the altar for nearly an hour, trying to understand how a future could disappear overnight, trying to figure out what I had missed. My mother eventually found me there. She sat beside me quietly. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then she gently placed her hand on mine. "You'll survive this." I shook my head. "No." "Yes." "You don't understand." Tears filled my eyes. "I don't even know what happened." That was the hardest part. Not knowing. Pain hurts. But uncertainty destroys you. Every possible explanation becomes a torture device. Your mind creates endless scenarios. Every one worse than the last. For weeks after her disappearance, I barely slept. I called her phone constantly. Voicemail. Every time. I checked social media. Nothing. Bank activity. Nothing. Nothing. It was as if she had been erased from existence. Then things became even stranger. About 3 weeks after she vanished, I received an anonymous message. It arrived through a newly created email account. No name. No identifying information. Just one sentence. "Stop looking for her." That was it. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. I immediately showed the message to the police. They traced it. Dead end. The account had been created using public Wi-Fi. No useful leads. But the message changed everything. Because it proved one thing. Someone knew where Emily was. And someone wanted me to stop searching. That realization consumed me. Who sent it? Emily herself? A friend? A stranger? Someone dangerous? Every possibility felt terrifying. Months passed. The investigation stalled. Police eventually reduced active efforts. Without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Most people slowly moved on. But I couldn't. Every room in my apartment reminded me of her. Every restaurant. Every song. Every memory. I became obsessed with finding answers. And that's when I decided to go through the last of her belongings. Most of her personal items had remained untouched. After the wedding was canceled, her parents asked if I wanted anything she had left at my apartment. I couldn't bring myself to look through it immediately. The pain was too fresh. But nearly 2 months later, I finally gathered enough courage. I spent an entire Saturday sorting through boxes. Photographs. Clothes. Jewelry. Small reminders of the life we'd planned together. At first, everything seemed normal. Painful. But normal. Then I opened her closet. And found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden behind several winter coats was a small black duffel bag. I had never seen it before. Not once. Which was strange. Emily practically lived at my apartment. How had I missed it? Curious, I unzipped it. Inside were items that immediately raised questions. A prepaid cell phone. Several receipts. A stack of photographs. And a sealed envelope with my name written on it. My hands began shaking. For several seconds I simply stared at the envelope. Part of me didn't want to open it. Part of me feared what was inside. Eventually I tore it open. The note contained only 6 handwritten words. "I'm sorry. None of this is your fault." That was all. No explanation. No location. No answers. Just an apology. I read it at least 20 times. The handwriting was definitely hers. Which meant one thing. Emily had planned something. At least to some degree. People don't hide apology letters accidentally. Then I examined the photographs. Most were ordinary. Old family pictures. Childhood photos. Vacation memories. But one photograph immediately stood out. A picture of Emily standing beside a young man I had never seen before. They looked close. Very close. His arm was around her shoulders. Both were smiling. The photo appeared old. Maybe 10 years old. On the back, someone had written, "Forever, no matter what happens." No name. No date. Nothing else. I stared at that photo for hours. Who was he? An ex-boyfriend? A relative? A friend? Why had she hidden it? The prepaid phone created even more questions. When I turned it on, there were only a handful of stored numbers. Every contact used initials instead of names. AB. Chike. No identifying details. The call logs had been deleted. Most messages were gone. Except one. A single text message received 3 weeks before the wedding. I still remember the exact words. "Time is running out. You must decide." That's all it said. No context. No explanation. Nothing. My heart pounded as I read it. Decide what? Who sent it? What was happening? Suddenly the woman I thought I knew felt like a stranger. The receipts added another layer of mystery. Several were from hotels in cities Emily had never mentioned visiting. One was dated only 2 months before our wedding. A hotel nearly 4 hours away. I checked my memory. That weekend she had told me she was attending a work conference. Had she lied? I didn't want to believe it. But the evidence kept piling up. The more I investigated, the less sense everything made. Some clues suggested an affair. Others suggested blackmail. Others hinted at family secrets. Every answer created 3 new questions. And then I discovered the most disturbing item of all. Tucked inside a side pocket of the duffel bag was a folded document. At first glance it looked like a birth certificate. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't Emily's. It belonged to someone else. Someone whose name I had never heard before. Yet one detail immediately caught my attention. The mother's name listed on the certificate was someone from Emily's family. Someone I knew very well. Someone who had spent years pretending this person didn't exist. Suddenly, a terrible possibility entered my mind. A possibility so shocking that I immediately dismissed it. It couldn't be true. It simply couldn't. But if it was, then Emily's disappearance had nothing to do with cold feet. Nothing to do with cheating. Nothing to do with second thoughts. It meant her entire family had been hiding something for decades. Something powerful enough to destroy lives. And somehow, Emily had become trapped in the middle of it. I didn't know it yet. But 8 months later, when she finally returned to my doorstep carrying a child, every one of those clues would begin making sense. And the first words out of her mouth would change everything I believed about the people closest to us. 8 months. That's how long Emily was gone. 243 days. Not that I was counting. At least that's what I told people. The truth was, I remembered every single one. Every morning I woke up wondering if today would be the day I'd finally get answers. Every night I went to sleep disappointed. The investigation had gone nowhere. The anonymous email was a dead end. The prepaid phone revealed nothing useful. The mysterious birth certificate raised more questions than answers. And Emily remained a ghost. Sometimes I convinced myself she was dead. Other times I convinced myself she had started a new life somewhere. Occasionally I imagined she'd show up and explain everything. But as the months passed, even that hope began to fade. Life moved on. Or at least pretended to. I returned to work. Started exercising again. Spent more time with friends. My family encouraged me to move forward. To heal. To let go. I tried. God knows I tried. But some wounds don't close when there are no answers. They stay open. Quietly bleeding beneath the surface. Then came the rainstorm. That night everything changed. It was late October. Cold. Windy. The kind of evening where the rain strikes the windows hard enough to sound like tiny explosions. I had just finished dinner. The television was playing in the background. I wasn't really watching it. I was sitting on the couch staring into space, thinking about absolutely nothing. Or maybe thinking about Emily. At that point, the two had become almost the same thing. Then someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow knocks. Not aggressive. Not hesitant. Deliberate. I glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Another knock. I stood up, walked toward the door, and opened it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Standing on my porch was Emily. Rain soaked her dark hair. Water dripped from her jacket. Her face looked thinner, paler, older somehow, as if she'd aged years in only months. But that wasn't what stole the air from my lungs. It was her stomach. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. At least 7 or 8 months. Maybe more. Time seemed to stop. Neither of us spoke. The rain continued falling around us. Cars passed somewhere in the distance. Yet all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. Ethan. I stared, unable to process what I was seeing, unable to process what it meant. Finally, I found my voice. No. The word escaped before I could stop it. She flinched. No. No. I shook my head. No. Because this wasn't possible. It couldn't be. 8 months ago, she disappeared. 8 months ago, she destroyed our future. And now she was standing in front of me carrying another man's child. Every emotion I'd buried came rushing back at once. Anger. Confusion. Hatred. The combination nearly broke me. She swallowed hard. Please let me explain. I laughed. A horrible laugh. The kind that comes from someone standing too close to madness. Explain. Ethan. Explain. My voice rose. You disappear for 8 months. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I know. You don't answer your phone. I know. You leave me standing at the altar. I know. You destroy my life. She lowered her head. I know. Then I pointed at her stomach. And now you're pregnant. The silence that followed felt endless. Neighbors' porch lights glowed through the rain. The wind howled between houses. Still, neither of us moved. Finally, Emily whispered something. I never wanted this. The sentence hit me strangely. Not because of what she said. Because of how she said it. There wasn't joy in her voice. There wasn't pride. There wasn't excitement. Only pain. Raw pain. And fear. The same fear I'd seen months earlier whenever her phone rang. My anger faltered. Only slightly. But enough. I stepped aside. Come inside. She looked relieved. Then exhausted. As if she'd been carrying more than just a child. The moment she entered my house, memories flooded the room. The couch where we'd watched movies. The kitchen where we'd cooked together. The walls we'd planned to paint after the wedding. Everything remained exactly as she left it. Emily noticed. Her eyes filled with tears again. You didn't change anything. No. She nodded sadly. For several minutes neither of us spoke. I made coffee. She didn't touch hers. Her hands trembled around the mug. The silence became unbearable. Finally, I asked the question that had consumed my life. Where were you? Emily closed her eyes. I can't answer that yet. My patience immediately vanished. What? I can't. 8 months. I slammed my hand against the table. 8 months, Emily. She flinched. I know. Then start talking. Her eyes met mine. And what I saw there chilled me. Not guilt. Not shame. Terror. Genuine terror. As if speaking certain words might trigger something dangerous. Or someone dangerous. The realization unsettled me. Because for the first time, I wondered if Emily hadn't disappeared voluntarily. Maybe something else had happened. Something worse. She reached into her purse, pulled out an old photograph, and slid it across the table. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was the same photograph I'd found hidden in her duffel bag. The young man with his arm around her shoulders. The one I'd spent months wondering about. Who is he? I asked. Emily stared at the picture. Tears rolled down her face. Then she whispered, his name is Daniel. My heart sank. Every terrible assumption immediately returned. Ex-boyfriend. Secret lover. The father. Maybe all three. I felt physically sick. Emily noticed my expression. And shook her head. No. What do you mean no? You're thinking the wrong thing. Then tell me the right thing. She looked away. As if gathering courage. As if preparing to step off a cliff. Then she spoke. Daniel isn't who you think he is. I leaned forward. Then who is he? She opened her mouth. Stopped. Tried again. Then finally said, Daniel was my brother. The words hit me like a freight train. I blinked. Certain I'd misheard. You're what? My brother. I stared at her. That made no sense. I knew her family. I'd spent years around them. Emily had only one brother. Michael. I knew him. We'd had beers together. Gone fishing together. He was alive. So who was Daniel? Emily seemed to read my thoughts. Not Michael. Then who? Her voice cracked. The brother nobody talks about. The room went silent. Suddenly the mysterious birth certificate flashed through my mind. The hidden photographs. The tension within her family. The strange arguments. The fear. The secrets. Everything. For the first time, pieces began aligning. But not in a way I understood. Emily. She looked at me. And I saw something break inside her. The exhaustion of carrying a secret too heavy for one person. The reason I disappeared. Her voice trembled. The reason I left. She placed a protective hand over her stomach. The reason all of this happened. I held my breath. Then she said the sentence that shattered every theory I'd spent 8 months building. A sentence so shocking that for several seconds my brain refused to process it. And then she told me who the father was. For several seconds after Emily's last sentence, neither of us spoke. The rain continued tapping against the windows. The coffee between us had gone cold. And I sat there staring at the woman I once planned to marry, feeling as though reality itself had shifted beneath my feet. My throat felt dry. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Finally, I managed to speak. Who is the father? Emily looked down at her hands. The silence stretched painfully. Then she whispered, Daniel. I froze. The room seemed to tilt. No. My voice came out barely above a whisper. No. She closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Ethan, please let me explain. I pushed my chair back so hard it nearly tipped over. No. My mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. The one conclusion no sane person wants to imagine. The one conclusion that made me physically sick. You just told me Daniel was your brother. Emily began crying harder. I know. You just said he's the father. I know how it sounds. How does it sound? My voice echoed through the kitchen. Emily, there is no other way for that to sound. She buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. Then she took a shaky breath and said something I never expected. Daniel isn't my biological brother. The words stopped me cold. I stared, confused, but trying desperately to keep up. Emily slowly wiped her eyes. Please sit down. I hesitated, then sat down. Because despite everything, I needed answers. And for the first time in 8 months, answers were finally coming. The truth, however, was far stranger than anything I had imagined. Emily took a deep breath. 26 years ago, before I was born, my mother had a child. I listened silently. His name was Daniel. Her voice trembled. He wasn't my father's son. A chill ran through me. Emily continued. My mother had an affair. The sentence hung in the air. She became pregnant. I immediately understood why nobody talked about Daniel. Why there was tension. Why there were secrets. Why there was shame. But Emily wasn't finished. When my father discovered the affair, he gave my mother a choice. I felt dread building inside me. What choice? Emily looked directly into my eyes. Him or the baby? My stomach dropped. No. She nodded slowly. Yes. The room suddenly felt colder. He threatened divorce. He threatened to take everything. He threatened to expose her publicly. Emily wiped away another tear. My mother chose her marriage. The words landed like a punch. I already knew where this story was heading. And I hated every second of it. Daniel was given away. Silence. He was placed with another family. His existence became a secret. No photographs. No conversations. No records. As far as the world was concerned, he never existed. I sat there stunned. Because suddenly so many things made sense. The hidden birth certificate. The family tension. The strange arguments. The mysterious photograph. The silence. The fear. All of it. But one question remained. If Daniel were gone? I swallowed hard. How did you find him? Emily looked toward the window. Her eyes were distant. Lost in memories. He found me. My heart skipped. What? 3 years ago. 3 years. Right around the time we got engaged. Suddenly every puzzle piece began shifting. Emily continued. He contacted me online. He didn't reveal who he was immediately. At first he just asked questions. Questions about the family. Questions about my mother. Questions about my father. Questions nobody else would ask. Eventually he told me the truth. He was my mother's first child. My half-brother. The son she abandoned. The son nobody acknowledged. The son was erased from family history. I could hear the pain in Emily's voice. Not just sadness. Guilt. The kind of guilt that doesn't belong to you but somehow becomes yours anyway. At first I didn't believe him. He showed me documents. Photos. Letters. Evidence. And once I saw everything. She paused. I knew he was telling the truth. I leaned back, trying to process everything. Daniel wasn't some secret lover. He wasn't an affair partner. He wasn't a criminal. He was a forgotten son searching for answers. But that still didn't explain the pregnancy. Or the disappearance. Or why Emily had vanished before our wedding. As if reading my thoughts, she continued. Daniel wasn't looking for revenge. At least not initially. He just wanted a family. Her voice broke. He wanted someone to acknowledge that he existed. For a moment I felt sorry for him. Honestly, how could I not? Imagine discovering your family deliberately erased you. Imagine spending your entire life knowing you were unwanted. Then Emily spoke the sentence that changed everything. My father refused. The sympathy vanished. Replaced by dread. What happened? Emily stared at the table. When Daniel contacted my mother, she secretly met him. That made sense. A mother wanting to reconnect. A lost child wanting answers. But then Emily shook her head. My father found out. And suddenly I knew something terrible was coming. What did he do? For several seconds she remained silent. Then she whispered, "He destroyed him." The words hit like ice water. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily looked at me. "He used his connections. He ruined Daniel's business. He spread lies. He threatened people who worked with him. He made sure nobody would hire him." I stared. Emily's father had always seemed strict, controlling, proud. But this sounded monstrous. He wanted Daniel gone. He wanted the secret buried forever. Emily's voice cracked again. But Daniel wouldn't disappear. I felt my pulse quicken, because now the story was becoming dangerous. Not emotional, dangerous. And then Emily revealed something else. Something that explained the strange phone calls. The letters. The fear. The mysterious messages. 6 months before our wedding, Daniel contacted me again. What did he want? Her eyes filled with tears. Help. The word hung heavily between us. He was struggling. He had lost everything. He was desperate. And he blamed my father. I nodded slowly. Understandably. Anyone would. Then Emily lowered her head. And that's when things started getting worse. What do you mean? She hesitated. Then finally answered. Daniel wasn't alone anymore. A cold sensation moved through my chest. What does that mean? Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. He had people around him. What people? Emily swallowed. The kind of people my father couldn't control. My heart sank. Now I understood the fear. The secrecy. Whatever happened next wasn't just family drama. It was something far more dangerous. Something that eventually forced Emily to make an impossible choice. And as she continued speaking, I realized the disappearance 8 months earlier hadn't been an act of betrayal. It had been the beginning of a war. A war between a forgotten son and the family that abandoned him. A war that somehow trapped Emily in the middle. And the worst part? The biggest secret still hadn't been revealed. Because Daniel wasn't actually the person controlling events. Someone else had been pulling the strings from the shadows the entire time. Someone far closer to us than either of us could have imagined. Someone whose betrayal would shatter both families forever. By the time Emily finished explaining Daniel's story, it was well past midnight. The storm outside had weakened. The rain had become a soft drizzle. But inside my house, everything felt heavier than ever. For months, I had convinced myself that Emily abandoned me. Then I convinced myself she had cheated. Then I believed she had been hiding some secret affair. Now, every theory I had built over 8 painful months lay in pieces around me. And somehow, I still didn't know the full truth. I looked at Emily. Exhausted. Pregnant. Terrified. And despite everything she told me, one question kept echoing in my mind. If Daniel isn't the one responsible? She slowly nodded. He's not. Then who is? The look that crossed her face frightened me. Not because of what it showed. Because of what it didn't. There was no anger. No hatred. Only disappointment. The kind of disappointment that comes when someone you trust betrays you completely. For a long moment she stared at the floor. Then she whispered, "It's Michael." The name hit me like a hammer. Michael. Her brother. The brother I knew. The brother I'd gone fishing with. The brother who had stood beside me at family barbecues. The brother who had toasted our engagement. I blinked. Certain I'd heard wrong. Michael. She nodded. No. Ethan. No. I shook my head. Not Michael. Because it made no sense. Michael wasn't manipulative. He wasn't cruel. If anything, he was the most easygoing person in the family. Or so I thought. Emily gave me a sad smile. That's exactly why nobody suspected him. The room suddenly felt smaller. More claustrophobic. I leaned back in my chair. Trying to understand. Trying to find some explanation that didn't sound insane. What did he do? Emily took a deep breath. Then she revealed the first crack in the image I'd built of Michael. Daniel didn't find me by accident. I frowned. What do you mean? It was Michael. My stomach tightened. He contacted Daniel first. The words hung in the air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then realization slowly crept into my mind. No. Emily nodded. Yes. The hidden photographs. The phone calls. The letters. The secret meetings. Michael had been involved from the beginning. And suddenly I remembered something. 3 years earlier. A family barbecue. Michael and Emily arguing privately near the backyard fence. At the time, I hadn't paid attention. They stopped talking when I approached. I assumed it was normal sibling drama. Now I wondered if that argument had been about Daniel. Emily continued. Michael always hated Dad. That surprised me. From the outside they seemed close. But appearances had already proven meaningless. Why? She laughed bitterly. Because Michael knew the truth. I frowned. What truth? Her eyes met mine. The real reason Daniel was abandoned. A chill ran through me. There's more. Oh, Ethan. She shook her head sadly. There's so much more. My pulse quickened. Because every answer seemed to uncover another layer. Another secret. Another lie. Emily stared out the window for several seconds. Then she began explaining. Years earlier, when Michael was still a teenager, he discovered a box hidden in their father's office. Inside were letters. Old legal documents. Photographs. Evidence of Daniel's existence. Evidence that their father had spent decades covering up. Michael confronted him. The confrontation turned ugly. Very ugly. According to Emily, it ended with Franklin telling Michael something he'd never forgotten. If that boy comes near this family again, I'll destroy him. At the time, Michael thought it was an empty threat. Years later he learned it wasn't. When Daniel finally reappeared, Franklin did exactly what he promised. He destroyed Daniel's life. And Michael watched it happen. Something changed in him after that. Something dark. Something dangerous. He became obsessed, Emily said quietly. With revenge. She nodded. At first, yes. The silence stretched. Then she added. But eventually it became something else. What? Emily swallowed. Control. The word immediately unsettled me. Because control wasn't about justice. It wasn't about protecting anyone. It was about power. And power changes people. Sometimes permanently. According to Emily, Michael secretly began helping Daniel. Providing information. Family details. Financial records. Anything useful. At first, Daniel believed Michael genuinely wanted to help reconnect the family. But Michael had his own agenda. One nobody understood until it was too late. He wanted everything to explode. I frowned. What does that mean? He wanted every secret exposed. He wanted Dad destroyed. He wanted Mom humiliated. He wanted the family to collapse. I felt sick. Because suddenly I understood something terrifying. People seeking justice eventually stop when justice is achieved. People seeking revenge never stop. They simply find new targets. Emily continued. The closer our wedding got, the worse things became. The words immediately grabbed my attention. What does our wedding have to do with any of this? She looked down. And for the first time that night I saw shame. Real shame. Not fear. Not sadness. Shame. My wedding was the trigger. I stared. What? She nodded slowly. Michael hated the idea of it. Why? Because he believed it symbolized everything he despised. That made no sense. Until she explained further. To Michael, our wedding represented the perfect family image. Happy daughter. Successful future. Smiling parents. Beautiful ceremony. Everything Franklin wanted the world to see. Meanwhile, Daniel remained erased. Forgotten. Discarded. The contrast infuriated him. So Michael began pushing harder. Harder against Franklin. Harder against the family. Harder against everyone. Including Emily. Especially Emily. I felt dread building again. What did he do? Her eyes filled with tears. He gave me an ultimatum. My chest tightened. What ultimatum? For a moment, she couldn't speak. When she finally did, her voice barely rose above a whisper. He said I had to choose. The exact words from the mysterious text message flashed into my mind. Time is running out. You must decide. My heart nearly stopped. The message. The phone. Meanwhile, suddenly it all made sense. That was Michael. Emily nodded. Slowly. Painfully. The realization hit me like a freight train. All those months I'd assumed some mysterious stranger sent the message. Instead, it came from someone sitting beside me at family dinners. Someone who shook my hand. Someone who smiled in wedding photos. Someone I trusted. I felt nauseous. What was the choice? Emily looked directly into my eyes. And what she said next shattered me. He wanted me to publicly expose my parents during the wedding. I froze. What? He wanted me to reveal Daniel's existence in front of everyone. The image formed instantly in my mind. Hundreds of guests. Family members. Friends. The ceremony. Then chaos. The The perfect public destruction of Franklin. Exactly the kind of revenge Michael craved. What did you do? Emily's voice cracked. I refused. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Of course she refused. Any reasonable person would. But Emily wasn't finished. Then he threatened Daniel. The room fell silent. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Because I already knew where this was heading. And I wasn't going to like it. He told me if I didn't cooperate, tears rolled down her cheeks. He would make sure Daniel disappeared forever. I stared at her, unable to speak, because suddenly the fear I'd seen months earlier finally made sense. The panic, the phone calls, the secret letters, the tears. She hadn't been planning a wedding. She'd been trying to stop a disaster, trying to protect people she loved, trying to hold together a family that was already falling apart. And then she revealed the final piece. The piece that explained why she vanished 3 days before the wedding. The piece that changed everything. Ethan. She looked at me through tears. The night before I disappeared, Michael showed me something. What? Her hands trembled. A video. The dread returned instantly. What kind of video? She closed her eyes. Then whispered. Proof that he wasn't bluffing. My blood ran cold. Because whatever was on that video was powerful enough to make Emily walk away from her entire life. Powerful enough to leave me standing alone at the altar. Powerful enough to disappear for 8 months. And as she prepared to tell me what she'd seen, I realized the nightmare was far from over. Because the truth wasn't just coming. It was about to explode. And when it did, neither family would survive it unchanged. I barely slept that night. After everything Emily had revealed, my mind felt like a storm. Daniel. The family secret. Michael's manipulation. The threats. The ultimatum. None of it felt real. Yet the exhausted woman sitting across from me was proof that it was. As dawn approached, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. What was on the video? Emily's face immediately went pale. For several seconds she couldn't speak. When she finally did, her voice trembled. It showed Daniel being followed. A chill ran through me. What? She nodded. It wasn't an accident. The room suddenly felt colder. Michael hired someone. I stared at her. Hired someone? To scare him. The words hit hard. Very hard. Because there was a huge difference between revenge and intimidation. A huge difference between exposing secrets and threatening lives. Emily continued. At first Michael claimed it was harmless. But then he started losing control. She wiped tears from her eyes. The people he hired weren't good people. I felt sick. Because now the situation had crossed a line. This wasn't family drama anymore. This wasn't emotional manipulation. This was something darker. Much darker. The video showed Daniel being cornered outside his apartment. My stomach twisted. He wasn't hurt. Not physically. But the message was clear. Emily looked directly at me. Cooperate or things get worse. For a moment I couldn't speak. Everything I thought I knew about Michael was gone. Destroyed. Replaced by someone I barely recognized. And suddenly I understood why Emily had disappeared. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting Daniel. Protecting her mother. Protecting everyone. Or at least trying to. What happened after you saw the video? Emily stared out the window. I left. Just like that. She nodded. I packed a bag and left. Where did you go? The answer surprised me. To Daniel. For months I had imagined Emily running toward some secret lover. Some affair. Some hidden life. Instead, she had run toward the one person everyone else had abandoned. The forgotten brother. The erased son. The family secret. I thought if I could keep everyone apart, nobody would get hurt. She laughed bitterly. I was wrong. The sadness in her voice was devastating. Because I could tell she genuinely believed she had done the right thing. Even though it destroyed us. Even though it destroyed everything. The next question came naturally. The baby. Emily instinctively placed a hand on her stomach. I watched her expression soften for the first time all night. A mother's expression. Protective. Loving. Gentle. The baby. She smiled sadly. Her name is Lily. For a moment I didn't understand. Then I realized. A girl. She was having a daughter. And suddenly something struck me. A question I should have asked hours ago. Emily. She looked up. You said Daniel is the father. She nodded. But you also said he's your half-brother. Immediately, her eyes widened. Then she laughed through tears. A genuine laugh. The first one I'd heard all night. Ethan. What? Oh my God. She covered her face. Then shook her head. I didn't mean biological father. I blinked. What? The realization hit both of us simultaneously. Months of assumptions. Hours of confusion. One terrible misunderstanding. Emily quickly explained. Daniel adopted Lily. My brain struggled to catch up. Adopted? Yes. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Then who's the biological father? Emily's smile disappeared. And suddenly we were back in dangerous territory. Because the answer wasn't simple. Or pleasant. She took a deep breath. Then finally told me. There isn't one. I stared. Confused. What does that mean? Tears filled her eyes again. I was already pregnant when I disappeared. The room went completely silent. My heart nearly stopped. What? She nodded. Slowly. Painfully. I found out 2 weeks before the wedding. I couldn't breathe. The implications crashed into me all at once. 2 weeks before the wedding. Pregnant. Before she disappeared. Before everything happened. Only one possibility existed. My voice barely worked. Emily. She looked at me. The tears returned. And then she whispered the words that changed everything. The baby is yours. For several seconds the world simply stopped. No sound. No movement. Nothing. I stared at her. Certain I had imagined it. Certain I had misunderstood. The baby. She nodded. Is yours. I sat there completely frozen. Because in all my theories, all my fears, all my nightmares, this possibility had never occurred to me. Not once. I felt dizzy. Overwhelmed. Unable to process what I'd just heard. Then Emily reached into her purse. Pulled out an envelope. And handed it to me. Inside was a DNA test. My hands trembled as I opened it. The results were undeniable. 99.99%. I was Lily's father. The room blurred. Tears filled my eyes. Not because I was sad. Because I didn't know what I felt. Relief. Anger. Grief. All at once. For 8 months I had believed I lost everything. Meanwhile I had a daughter. A daughter I never knew existed. A daughter who was only weeks away from being born. I covered my face. Trying to steady myself. Trying to breathe. Emily began crying too. I'm sorry. The words broke something inside me. I'm so sorry. For the first time since she'd arrived, I truly understood the weight she'd been carrying. Not just the family secret. Not just the threats. Not just the disappearance. A child. Our child. And she had carried that burden completely alone. Eventually we both calmed down. But there was still one thing left unfinished. One thing that could no longer remain hidden. The truth. The entire truth. Not fragments. Not secrets. Not half-confessions. Everything. Which meant there was only one thing left to do. Confront the family. All of them. Together. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more hiding. And 2 days later, that's exactly what happened. It took place in Franklin's house. The same house where secrets had been buried for decades. The same house where Daniel's existence had been erased. The same house where every lie began. When everyone arrived, the tension was unbearable. Franklin. His wife. Michael. Daniel. Emily. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Daniel stepped forward. And looked directly at the father who had abandoned him. The father who spent 26 years pretending he didn't exist. The father who destroyed his life. The father who never once apologized. Franklin stared back. Silent. Unmoving. The room held its breath. Then Daniel spoke. One sentence. Just one. But it shattered the silence like glass. Look at me and tell me I deserved it. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And for the first time in decades, Franklin's mask finally began to crack. The room was silent. Painfully silent. After Daniel asked his question, nobody seemed capable of speaking. The tension felt suffocating. 26 years of secrets sat between us. 26 years of lies. 26 years of damage. And now, finally, there was nowhere left to hide. Daniel stood in the center of the room, staring directly at Franklin. Waiting. Demanding an answer. For the first time since I'd known him, Franklin looked old. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the weight of everything he'd buried had suddenly become too heavy to carry. His confident posture was gone. His usual control had vanished. All that remained was a tired man facing the consequences of his choices. Daniel's voice cracked. Look at me. Franklin slowly raised his eyes. The room held its breath. Daniel swallowed hard. I spent my entire life wondering what was wrong with me. No one moved. No one interrupted. I thought maybe I wasn't smart enough. His voice trembled. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Tears filled his eyes. Maybe I wasn't worth loving. Emily quietly began crying. So did her mother. Daniel continued. Do you know what it's like growing up knowing your own family doesn't want you? Franklin lowered his head. Still silent. Daniel laughed bitterly. I used to imagine meeting you. The sadness in his voice was heartbreaking. I imagined you'd tell me there had been a mistake. I imagined you'd explain everything. I imagined you'd say you were sorry. Another painful silence. Then Daniel asked the question that mattered most. Was I ever your son? The room froze. For several seconds, Franklin couldn't answer. Then something unexpected happened. His wife stood up. Not Emily. Not Michael. Not Daniel. His wife. The woman who had lived with this secret for more than 2 decades. The woman who had lost a son. The woman whose guilt had quietly consumed her for years. She walked toward Daniel. Tears streamed down her face. Then she did something nobody expected. She hugged him. Daniel froze. Completely frozen. As if he couldn't believe it was real. The room erupted into tears. Emily cried. I cried. Even Michael looked emotional. For nearly 30 seconds, nobody spoke. The mother and son simply stood there holding each other. 26 years of separation collapsing in a single moment. When she finally pulled away, she looked directly at Daniel. And said the words he had waited his entire life to hear. I never stopped loving you. Daniel broke down completely. So did she. The emotional weight of that moment is impossible to describe. Because some wounds never truly heal. But acknowledgement matters. Truth matters. Love matters. Even when it arrives years too late. Then everyone turned toward Franklin. The room became quiet again. Because there was still one person who hadn't spoken. One person who still owed answers. Franklin stared at the floor. His shoulders slumped. And then, finally, he spoke. I was afraid. The confession surprised everyone. Including Daniel. Including me. Including Franklin himself. I was young. His voice cracked. Arrogant. Selfish. I cared more about my reputation than my family. Tears filled his eyes. And every year after that, he paused. Admitting I was wrong became harder. The honesty in his voice felt genuine. Painful. Human. I kept telling myself it was too late. He looked at Daniel. I told myself reopening old wounds would only make things worse. Daniel stared back silently. Franklin wiped away tears. But the truth is... His voice broke completely. I was a coward. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room simply absorbed the weight of those words. Because sometimes the hardest confession isn't what you did. It's admitting why you did it. Then Franklin looked directly at Daniel. The forgotten son. The erased child. The boy who had spent his life searching for answers. And finally said, I'm sorry. Daniel closed his eyes. The apology didn't erase the past. It didn't erase 26 years. It didn't erase abandonment. It didn't erase pain. But it mattered. Because it was real. And sometimes that's all people truly want. The truth. Not perfection. Not excuses. Just truth. For a moment, it seemed like things might finally heal. Then Michael stood up. Everyone turned toward him. His expression was unreadable. Tired. Defeated. Broken. And for the first time, he looked nothing like the confident man I'd known. He looked like someone carrying years of anger. Years of resentment. Years of disappointment. Michael looked at Daniel. Then his mother. Then Franklin. Finally, he looked at Emily. I'm sorry. The words shocked everyone. Especially Emily. Michael shook his head. I wanted justice. His voice trembled. But somewhere along the way, he laughed bitterly. I became obsessed. Nobody argued. Nobody disagreed. Because he was right. Revenge had consumed him. Turned him into something he never intended to become. Tears filled his eyes. I thought destroying Dad would fix everything. He looked at Daniel. I thought exposing the truth would heal you. Then he lowered his head. But I only made things worse. The room remained silent. Because there wasn't really anything left to say. The truth had finally surfaced. Every secret. Every lie. Every mistake. Everything. And somehow, despite all the damage, nobody felt victorious. Only exhausted. The war was over. But wars leave scars. The months that followed weren't easy. Healing never is. Daniel slowly rebuilt his relationship with his mother. Franklin began attending therapy. Something none of us ever expected. Michael accepted responsibility for his actions. The people he hired were investigated. The intimidation stopped. The threats ended. For the first time in years, the family stopped living in fear. And then Lily arrived. 3 weeks after that confrontation. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Healthy. Beautiful. Perfect. I still remember the first time I held her. She wrapped her tiny hand around my finger. And suddenly nothing else mattered. Not the wedding. Not the betrayal. Not the secrets. Not the pain. Just her. A tiny human who knew nothing about family wars. Nothing about lies. Nothing about regret. Only love. Pure, uncomplicated love. Emily cried when she saw me holding Lily. I think part of her feared I would walk away. Honestly, part of me had considered it. Not because of Lily. Never because of Lily. But because rebuilding trust felt impossible. The woman I loved had disappeared. The life I planned had been destroyed. The future I'd imagined was gone. Yet every time I looked at our daughter, I realized something. The story wasn't ending. It was beginning again. Slowly. Painfully. Carefully. Emily and I didn't get back together immediately. Real life doesn't work that way. Trust takes time. Healing takes time. Forgiveness takes time. For nearly a year, we focused only on Lily. Co-parenting. Communicating. Learning. Growing. And eventually something surprising happened. The friendship returned. Then the laughter. Then the connection. Piece by piece. Brick by brick. We rebuilt something neither of us thought was possible. Not the relationship we had before. That relationship died the day she disappeared. Something different. Something stronger. Something honest. Because secrets had nearly destroyed us. Truth became the only thing we refused to compromise on. Today, Lily is 5 years old. Daniel is part of her life. So is Franklin. Ironically, they have a relationship now. Not perfect, but real. Michael still carries guilt. But he's working through it. And Emily still apologizes sometimes. Usually when we're alone. Usually when old memories resurface. I always tell her the same thing. We can't change the past. We can only choose what we do next. The strange thing is, if you had asked me during those 8 months whether I could ever forgive her, I would have said no. Without hesitation. Absolutely not. But life is rarely that simple. People are complicated. Families are complicated. Love is complicated. Sometimes the people who hurt us are also the people who were hurting themselves. That doesn't excuse what happened. But understanding changes everything. Looking back now, the biggest lesson wasn't about betrayal. It wasn't about secrets. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about truth. Because the truth always comes out. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not even for 26 years. But eventually, the truth finds its way into the light. And when it does, you only have 2 choices. Face it, or let it destroy you. 3 days before our wedding, my fiancée vanished without a single explanation. 8 months later, she came back pregnant. At the time, I thought it was the end of my life. I had no idea it was the beginning of a story far stranger than anything I could imagine. A story about family, about secrets, about loss, about redemption, and about a little girl named Lily who somehow brought all of us back together. And that's my confession.